Clubs are not making bad decisions because they don't have the information available to them. The decision maker is so hopelessly reliant on other people for that information. They often just resort to texting agents on WhatsApp, and that's when bad decisions happen.
Jake Schuster wants to change who makes that call and how. His company, Gemini Sports, built an entire AI co-pilot for sporting directors. He's raised around $7 million. His customers have ranged from the Indianapolis Colts in the NFL to European football clubs like Parma.
We're not an analytics company, we're not a data company. There are people out there paying close to $1 million a year for algorithms that are not as good as ours because of marketing. Being clever is commoditized. What we sell is workflows. We sell automation, we sell efficiency.
Before any of this existed, what is one thing you wish someone had told you then, but nobody did?
Pain tolerance is the only quality required to be a successful entrepreneur. Don't care about how smart people are. It doesn't matter. All that's required to be a successful entrepreneur.
Every summer, football clubs spend billions of dollars on players, 9-figure transfer budgets, and entire seasons riding on one signing. And a shocking amount of that decision still comes down to an agent's phone call, a scout's gut, and a spreadsheet someone built at 2 a.m. Jake Schuster wants to change who makes that call and how. His company, Gemini Sports, built an entire AI co-pilot for sporting directors. The pitch is simple. Take the finance, the recruitment, and the analysis that's normally scattered across 10 different people and 10 different tools, and put the whole thing into one app on your phone so that you can make that roster call in an airport mid-transfer window without waiting on that tech guy. By his own account, he's raised around $7 million, and his investors, according to the company, own 27 different organizations around the world. His customers have ranged from the Indianapolis Colts in the NFL to European football clubs like Parma. And here's the part I find super interesting. Jake didn't come from a tech background. He came from the sidelines. A sports scientist who spent years making elite athletes physically faster and then got tired of fighting SQL and Python just to answer a basic question about his players. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the GenZEO Playbook podcast. I'm Rayyan, and in the next 30 minutes, Jake is going to walk us through what his AI actually does on a chaotic transfer deadline day, why he killed his first product 6 months in, and whether win the transfer market is a real edge or just a nicer looking dashboard that lets executives outsource the blame. But first, we need to understand what his product actually does. Jake, welcome to the podcast, and I'm so honored to have you here today. Before we begin, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, Ryan. Thank you so much for the introduction. That was beautiful. You're going to give a run for their money to our friends Charlie Stebbings over at the Business of Sport podcast. That was beautiful.
Thank you. So Jake, before we get into the transfer market and AI stuff, I want you to just explain Gemini to me. Like, I'm a sporting director who's been doing this for 20 years, but has never once trusted an AI model. Like, I want you to walk me through it like it's the worst day of my year. It's deadline day. I have 3 deals moving at once. My manager wants a left back. My finance guy is panicking about the wage bill. And I want to know exactly what your product would do in that moment.
Well, it's going to bring people together, and it's going to make it easier to find the information that you need, which in turn will make it easier to make the right decision, and one that could have huge effects on not just your finances, but on-field outcomes and ultimately people's jobs. So, I often say that clubs are not making bad decisions because they don't have the information available to them. They actually don't have it at their fingertips, and they don't have it in the context that they need, and they can't get access to the right information fast enough or easily enough. Now, the concept of a single source of truth or a source of record is old news in most mainstream business industries, but football, for all their best intentions, are pretty far behind. And so football clubs are working in complete silos between all the different departments that you mentioned, like you mentioned. And what we find is the decision maker is so hopelessly reliant on other people for that information that they often just resort to texting agents on WhatsApp. And that's when bad decisions happen. It's not that having agent relationships aren't critically important, but it single threads your information, which is, of course, a big problem in making holistic decisions.
Mm-hmm. And so is that why you decided to build it for an app on my phone instead of like a flashy like a dashboard on my computer?
Absolutely. And of course, we also have a desktop product that's connected to everything as well as API. But the reality is decision makers at football clubs are not only on their phones all the time, they're on the move all the time. They can't pull out a computer.
Hmm.
And people often say that the football industry runs on WhatsApp, and that's not far off. So we have to meet people where they are. And what I find is the best analysts in the world are still focused on sexy research and not focused on the end user and what they need. And so we're here to come in and solve that problem.
Hmm. That sounds great. Yeah. Jake, you didn't take the obvious founder route. You weren't like a 19-year-old college student coding in your dorm, but you had spent years as a sports scientist working with Olympic pro programs and making athletes physically faster. So, can you take me back to the specific moment when you stopped being the guy on the sideline and decided to go and build the software? Like, what exactly was a problem there in front of you that made you say, hey, someone needs to solve this, and it might have to be me?
I was working for the New Zealand All Blacks in the run up to the 2016 Olympic Games, working within that rugby program. And I had to learn MATLAB, SQL, and Python. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. Why does someone have to learn completely new skills to just surface the information that's been made available to them and turn it into actionable decisions? And I really began to observe the acute friction point that decision makers are helplessly reliant, as I mentioned, on analysts for answers to any question they have. Now, make no mistake, analysts are really important, and football researchers are critical parts of any player trading operation. But they should be just that. They shouldn't also be data architects and engineers and application developers. And I just think it's a bit preposterous to think that the critical pieces of insight that should go into these decisions should be literally at the fingertips of the decision maker. And so that became my mission.
Mhm. So you said that you made the first version of Gemini for like the wrong person, like you said before, right? You aimed it for data scientists, but the people who actually made the calls didn't think like data scientists, right? So can you walk me through the moment you realized, like, I don't want the polished version, I want the actual week you looked at the thing you'd spent months building, and when this is a product built for nobody.
Well, I'm sure much of your audience have heard Henry Ford's quote that if he listened to what the customers really wanted, he would have just built a faster horse. And I think I accidentally built a faster horse. And ultimately, what was funny is, we were trying to allow more, let's say, moderately technical analysts to work the way that deep learning engineers and machine learning engineers would. And they actually didn't want to do that. They didn't care. They wanted to keep learning programming. And it wasn't a valuable enough product to have a high enough ticket size in terms of the contract values for it to be meaningful as a business. It would have been a good business. It wouldn't have been a venture backable business. And I realized that I hadn't thought hard enough about the user. And I kind of thought that I thought that decision makers would use something that had a moderate level of sophistication. And then I realized that they actually don't want that. They want the answers. They want the ability to click a layer deeper when they have more questions, which they always will. But they
Hmm.
actually want things boiled down further than I realized, and they want it on their phone. And so so we were in the NFL and the NBA, and then the first soccer user, global football user, that we had actually, so Christian Nori, the CEO at Queen's Park Rangers, he's the youngest CEO in professional sports and just a brilliantly innovative guy. He was using our old product to make player watch lists and simulate player trades and forecast how players were going to perform when they would come into his league versus other leagues. We just said, let's make that a product. And he asked for us to put it in a mobile app, and we did.
That sounds great. Yeah. Before you let your first version go, I wanted to ask, how long did you let yourself keep believing it before you ended up killing it?
Probably about 6 months too long.
Hmm. Hmm. All right.
Yeah.
Jake, I want to push on one thing now. Help the most innovative clubs win the transfer market. That's the line your company stands on. But clubs have been sold data scouting for over a decade now, and every analytics company in football promises an edge, but half of them are gone. So, my honest question would be, where's the line between Gemini being a real edge and Gemini being a more confident way to sell certainty that doesn't actually exist? Like, as you know, transfers fail all the time. So, what is your model genuinely able to tell someone that a great scout and a great spreadsheet is unable to?
It's a fantastic question, Ryan. There's two parts to this. There's, are clubs actually innovative, and there's what makes our product unique. So I'll focus on the second one first. We're not an analytics company. We're not a data company. So we have great models inside because I believe that that's commoditized. There are people out there paying close to $1 million a year for algorithms that are not as good as ours because of marketing. And thankfully clubs are starting to, understand what a folly that's been and move across. But that's a story for another day. What we sell is workflows. We sell automation. We sell efficiency. Being clever is commoditized. Being super sophisticated in your models is table stakes nowadays. And we don't care about data scouting. If people call it information instead of data, they would not treat it as such a mystical thing. And so it's all information. Just as scouting reports are information, just as notes from agents are information, just as intel from the market itself financially is information. And so unifying that and making it actually easy to pull actionable decisions from is what we provide. And we actually care about the user experience in a way that I don't feel anyone has before. So while others are busy being clever in a way that nobody actually, that doesn't affect any actual transfer decisions, we're here to actually help the user in what their real life day-to-day is. Now, onto the question of are clubs actually innovative and not to embrace that. Check back in with me in a year. What I'd say is, with all due respect and love for people who are our customers and people who are not, I think that there's a lot more lip service paid to innovation than there is action taken. A lot of football clubs say that they're being clever, say that they've hired clever people, say that they use this and they use that, and they actually don't. There are clubs out there that have a head of AI, and I know their head coach and I know their sporting director, and nobody's ever met this guy. And he's posting on LinkedIn about how he's the head of AI. And I don't mean to be mean, but it's a farce. And clubs that actually get uncomfortable and change the way that they work are the ones that win. That's why I'm so proud to work with a club like Monaco, because they were already thought of as very innovative in the transfer market, very data led, and amazing scouts, and great at combining those two. And they called us. They said, we want to keep innovating. We want to be on the edge. We want to advance the way that we're working. And that's why they are where they are. So I think that there's a gap between folks who say that they're innovative and those who really are. And I think we're going to see a big difference over the next 5 years. I think we're going to see two things. We're going to see clubs that, they've got a big data department, or they bought this expensive consultant. They're not going to do much, and people are going to start looking at that critically. And then there's clubs who are refusing to innovate, and they're going to fall way behind. I think you've seen some, I won't name names, but I think you've seen some really big clubs have really bad seasons off the back of taking the wrong approach to this, whether that's refusing to adopt modern technology or trying to build it themselves in-house, which is very inefficient and frankly foolish. And they're now having to correct the entire process.
Jake, you mentioned before how your product is like, you're looking into what users actually want. So what are your competitors like? They're clearly not building for users. So what are they like building for? Like data, or what exactly are they trying to build their product for?
I see three paths. Two paths really. I see a focus on the algorithms and a focus on the scouts. And I think both are missing the point. You see a bit of an arms race right now. Everyone's doing club to club level communication. Everyone's doing finance and contract extraction. Well, all right. I'll give three separation pieces. So one is a focus on the algorithms and just saying, us having a 1% better player rating model is going to make all the difference. No, it's not. It's going to mean that the 14th ranked player is now 13th ranked. You're going to look at the same exact players. The other way that companies are going is really focusing on the scouts and just refusing to engage the sporting director. And I just think that's looking at it all wrong. Sure, the scouts want to be in their comfort zones and they want to have the features that they're used to. And I totally respect that. And we're building the feature completeness there. But focusing on the bells and whistles of one silo, of one department's workflows, is just compounding the problem. You're not making it any easier for the sporting director, the CEO, or the board of directors and owner to actually understand what's going on and to actually make decisions with autonomy or efficiency. And so to me, that's completely missing the point. And the third, respectfully to all the hardworking entrepreneurs out there, is there's a lot of companies saying that they do stuff that they don't. They're marketing things that they haven't even begun building. They're saying that something's feature complete when it's just a prototype. They're saying that something works when it doesn't. So when people say to me, "Oh, have you seen that company? They've released this," I say, "Yeah, go get a demo and make them actually click something. Don't let it be a Figma walkthrough." And listen, we've got bugs, we've got flaws, we've got shortcomings. I'm not here to throw stones, but I just don't find that every marketing post you'll see is completely forthcoming. And so we want to build our reputation on honesty and authenticity and caring about the actual end user.
That sounds great. Yeah. Jake, you've also described a sports organization as being like the overgrown family offices, collecting tons of data and decades behind Fortune 500 companies instead of actually using it, right? And I'm really curious why. Why are these billion-dollar industries and businesses with everything on the line, and why have sport of all industries are so slow to change like how they make decisions? Is it because like they trust their methods so much, like the current ones that they're using, or is it too much of a hassle to change? But like, why are they just so slow and resilient?
It would be a mistake to assume that because sports teams have a turnover of often billions of dollars, that means that they're run as professional businesses. They're not.
Okay.
And, we're seeing the tide shift. I think our timing has been great where, well, we were probably a bit too early, to be honest, where you're seeing floods of institutional capital coming into professional sports, and they're radically changing the way that an organization's run. But you can't do that overnight. One of my investors is buying a club in Southern Europe right now. I think they're finalizing it in the next 24 hours. And we've openly discussed the innovation plan there together. And they've said, look, first 12 months, we're not going to fire anyone. If someone wants to fire themselves or the results are terrible halfway in the season, we'll take a look, but we're not just going to clean house. That would be bad for the fans. That would put more pressure on us than is necessary. Let the football people do what the football people want to do. But this is a very insular industry, and there's not a lot of professionalism. And I don't mean behaviorally, I mean habitually, where they don't have business degrees. They don't have economic degrees. They don't know how to run this the way that a hedge fund would. So it's naive, but understandable that fans assume that these clubs are run that way. There are a lot of ex-football players, and there will always be another game on Saturday. Now, there's nothing wrong with ex-football players running your org, but there needs to be a dash of professional savvy from other industries. And some clubs have overdone it. They've swung the pendulum way too far and made a bad reputation for that approach, but some are getting the balance really, really correctly. So when we talk about clubs being overgrown family offices, you see a lot of people who have made their money in real estate or manufacturing or what have you. And then they buy a football club, and it's a combination of they don't have time to really think about the management, and they just let the people keep doing what they're doing. They're ill-informed by people advising the way that the club should be run, or their skills are not as transferable from their old industries to this one. Or finally, they just kind of lose their sense of things, and they become a fan again, and they behave irrationally in their management decisions, and the results show. And these people, I just want to say, these people have been wildly successful and done way more than I ever have in my life thus far, right? But that doesn't mean that they know how to run a football club.
Exactly. Yeah. I know you kind of answered this question before, but is there anything else you see coming in the next few years that people inside of these clubs are unable to see?
I'm sure people know it, but I think that a player trading operation and squad management inevitably becomes asset trading. And it already has. We already know this, but you still see last day of the window, manager takes a text from an agent buddy, says, I need a left back. And the player makes no sense for them, blows the budget for the January window, and doesn't work out and sets the club back a year. And people lose their jobs. It still happens over and over. I just think you're going to see that completely snuffed out. I think you're going to see the asset management, that the P&L, the money in, money out, players in, players out, is going to become completely ubiquitous and not the cool new trend. And this is not something that people don't know, but I think people might be avoiding the reality of it and how it's just going to become the standard.
Quick pause. If this conversation is sitting with you, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's the easiest way to support the channel, help keep the episodes alive, and join us on the journey. Jake, you wrote something that I keep on thinking about. It's basically why we keep delegating to the tech guys so much instead of being brave enough to make our own decision. And I want to connect that to my life as a volleyball player on my school volleyball team, right? So on my team, my position is a setter, right? I'm mostly the team decision maker. A lot of stress is on me. I have to analyze the team and figure out what mistakes they make and how we can benefit off the mistakes they make, right? Usually if a person makes a mistake, like a hitter would make a mistake, it's on me, right? So the stress doesn't stay on the hitter, they perform well, right? So I kind of get where you're coming from, and I want to connect this to my question. Basically, let's say your product would recommend a signing. A club spends 40 million on the player and the player ends up flopping. Who would really become accountable, the sporting director or your algorithm?
It's an important question, and I think it's patently wrong for any technology or service provider to be telling anyone how to do their job. And we do not recommend players to be signed. We recommend players to be examined and scouted. But again, we are just the scaffolding. We're just the toolkit. We're just the workflows that allow subject matter experts at these football clubs to do their jobs. And I think it's very distasteful that there are people out there making a lot of money, inappropriate amounts of money, recommending player rankings and signings because you can't know the nuance of this without being inside of a club. So we're just the facilitator. We're just the shepherd. And when you ask about over-reliance on technologists, listen, I have data scientists and, in my staff. I have data scientists that I'm personal friends with. I have data scientists on our customers that I love, respect, think are tremendous at their jobs. With that said, there is an epidemic of people having the wool pulled over their eyes by technologists because people don't understand it. The end user doesn't understand it. They see a dashboard and they think it's magic. They see an algorithm and they hear, excuse me, they see an algorithm and they don't understand it. They get told how sophisticated it is. So what? It's math. I'm sorry, it's math. It's beautiful math, but it's just math. And they think, my gosh, this person is brilliant. I have to listen to everything that they have to say. And folks, that's wrong. That's wrong. If you're a sporting director and you played football for 20 years, your knowledge is better than any algorithm. It does not mean sign someone that you love, that the scouts think are horrible, that the data checks think are awful, or that the finances don't make sense. It doesn't. But your eye and your subject matter expertise should always rule the day. And I think we just get into this space where someone who is good at making a dashboard or good at formulating an algorithm then becomes the trusted advisor on everything. And some of these people are truly special and possess dynamic applied football knowledge, and they should become part of the inner circle. And my hat goes off to them. But for every one of those, there's 9 that really shouldn't be in that position and shouldn't have such monopolized control over what a football club does or doesn't do. I've never met an engineer that hasn't said, I can build that myself. Any engineer worth their salt will say that. Just because they say that doesn't mean you should follow it. So when I see young analysts saying, why would we buy this? I'll just build the dashboards. It's just so foolish when football executives defer to that person who will almost certainly be gone within 18 months for a higher paying job, and their club will be 18 months behind. So again, I'm not here to rail against technologists. I am one myself, but I think that the way that they're held within football clubs perceptually is very dangerous.
All right. So there is a version of an AI copilot that is genuinely useful, but there's also a version that's just a very expensive way for executives to have something to blame. So Jake, how do you know that you're building another solution and not just another problem?
We do what very few companies do, and that's talk to our customers. I can't say we follow every single one of their ideas because oftentimes the customer doesn't actually know what they want. They have a feeling, they have a sensation, they have ideas. But what I can tell you is we talk to our users a lot. We spend a not insignificant amount of resources on bringing on advisors and consultants who are the absolute top sporting directors in the game. And that's not something I see other companies able to do because I think some of the best sporting directors in the game see what we're doing and the way we're doing it, and they actually want to be a part of this solution. And finally, we've hired one. We've hired Matthew Oakley, who captained 300 Premier League games. And he's worked in and around the game for almost 30 years, first as a player, then as a manager, an agent, and a sporting director. And he understands this day to day. He was a customer, and now he's working for us. And excuse me. And now he's working for us. And what we find is we often get a very different answer when we show him something than when we show me something. And that means that the designs and the prototypes and eventually the production features in our application are built thoughtfully for the actual end user, not for the analyst who wants to feel smart.
So yeah, when hiring someone, then you obviously look for the best of the best who have the most experience, right? You don't just hire some random guy off the street. You can't really do that nowadays, honestly. But I do have a question for the listeners, right? For people listening right now who are building something, a lot of them are trying to sell into industries that don't really want to change, right? And you've talked about how hard it is that Gemini isn't competing for an existing budget, and you're trying to get clubs to create a brand new line item that's never existed before. That's brutal, but it's honestly easier to be a cheaper version of something that they already buy. So, for a founder who is selling a category that doesn't really exist yet, what actually works and what would you recommend that they do?
It's a fantastic question, Ryan. I think firstly, I would recommend that people understand that. And I don't mean in general, I mean from each user, from each sales prospect that they're speaking to. So discovery is a hard thing. And oftentimes people don't want to talk. They just sit down and say, show me what you got. It's brutal, right? So I would recommend people read the book called Founding Sales, maybe a book called The Cold Start Problem, Crossing the Chasm. For sure, everybody should read Crossing the Chasm. And I'm raising that last one because you have to go find the early adopters. You have to find the people that say, I want to be first. I want it while it's still rough and half broken. Mm-hmm. And when you do discovery in a sales call, you need to understand if someone thinks of this as net new or if someone thinks that this is replacing something. We are often a new line item in a budget. We also allow you to phase out 2 to 3 products over the next year. Do I recommend that you throw them all at day one and put huge pressure on us both for complete org-wide adoption? I actually don't. But some want to go that way. But oftentimes you're going to get into a space where it's intimidating to make that much change. People are afraid of a wholesale adoption, especially of something new. So you have to understand where someone is. If they're an early adopter, if they're a late adopter, if they're a laggard, you have to understand what kind of attitude and philosophy they're coming into that meeting with and tailor your approach, your pitch to that.
Mm-hmm. Jake, when you said being first, is it the same way, like, let's give an example of presentations, right? Usually, like a person like me wouldn't want to go first exactly because we want to analyze, hey, what the first person did, like they're presenting at this level, should we add this stuff to meet their level? Is it the same type of thing in business, or would you just want to like be first to explore everything, make all the mistakes, and get the most opportunities? Because when you're second or you're coming after the first person, all the opportunities are gone, and like investors have already seen what first person has brought.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think in a way we were too early, and then we, as many companies don't, we survived long enough to be right on time. And by that I mean, look, so there's 2 different things, right? When I said we want to be first, I was quoting like a customer, where a customer thinks, I want to get this while it's still early in the adoption curve. As a company, you have first mover advantage and you have second mover advantage. Obviously, first mover advantage means you're running into green space. You can pick up all the wins right then and there, but it's hard because you have to teach people about what you're trying to do. Mm-hmm. Second mover advantage, you have an established product that people are paying money for, demonstrating that there's a problem people will pay to fix. And you get to come in and you get to do it better. And you get to show people, hey, if you're sick of whatever you're dealing with there, you've got an alternative to move across to. And we've got a bit of both, depending on what parts of our product you're talking about and what users we're talking to.
Jake, how do you get a skeptical, relationship-driven, slow-moving buyer to spend money on something they'd never even had a budget for?
Perseverance, persistence, and consistently showing people how you're improving. So when I've heard this type of question asked in the past, the answer is always something around make sure every piece of contact you have is valuable to them. That's really hard and it doesn't scale. So the only solution I've found, and it's not a pretty or easy one, is keep growing your product and hammer people with what you're doing. I have people that I consider to be personal friends who, for whatever reason, their team hasn't bought it yet. And I'll realize by accident that they didn't know that much about our product, or they forgot that I had a certain feature set, or I got to say, most people don't pay attention most of the time. Yesterday, I was pitching someone and I asked them at the end of the call how this compared to other products that they were looking at. And they said, well, the only thing I've seen that someone else has that you don't is X, Y, and Z. And he described the feature I had showed him 5 minutes earlier. I said, thank God I asked that question. Let me go show you again. Right. So don't take for granted that people understand what you do, and constantly, I'm not going to say drip feed, hammer people with stuff about your product. Don't hammer them with, hey, can you talk on Thursday? Hammer them with, this is what we do. That's awesome. And I find you never know if it's the 5th, the 15th, or the 56th time that you write someone with a product update that they're going to say, man, I'm on to that. One advantage that we have that I don't know if others in other industries will is that um, sports tech companies are often not really tech companies, and they often don't improve for years at a time, their products. And people are consistently astonished that genuinely every 3 weeks we release a new software cycle and we have sincere, substantial updates to our product. It's kind of breaking people's brains right now. And I'm agonizing, always feeling like we're not building fast enough. Or I wish that something
Wow.
didn't get delayed so that we can do it properly. But I've found that a lot of the momentum that we're gaining in the market right now is because we're proving to people that we're actually going to improve. A lot of times someone pitches a prototype and then a year and a half later, it's exactly the same. Or maybe it's just that prototype actually works. A year and a half later, we're unrecognizable. And so don't underestimate the value, especially with the way AI lets you build nowadays. And I'm sure we're going to talk more about those kind of things. The way that you're going to build trust with your audience, that they can actually take a risk on you because you're showing, you're demonstrating, you're proving to them how you're innovating.
So, Jake, how does one improve at such a speed, or how does one build at such a speed like you are right now? Like, people are shocked at the way you're building. So, like, yeah, is it constant team updates? Is there like a one tip you can give us at the speed of how you're building?
Don't be cheap with engineers. Get really good ones, because one senior engineer that costs 3 times what one mid-level or junior engineer would, or what 3 of them would, might be able to get 10 times more done than those 3 people.
All right, all right. Jake, for our last question, I want to go back to the version of you that was still a sports scientist. You were sitting there frustrated, fighting with code, knowing that the answer was buried in the data somewhere, but you just couldn't get to it. So, before any of this existed, what is one thing you wish someone had told you then, but nobody did? And you could take some time to answer this one.
Who you are today is not anything like who you're going to be in 5 years. Anything. And take that information and let it shape what you're capable of, what you can achieve, and what you can overcome.
That's some great advice, Jace. That is some great advice, Jake. It was so good, I was speechless.
No, thank you, Ryan. Look, it's important because you're going to have a fixed worldview when you start this, and the constraints of your universe are going to be one thing today and another thing tomorrow. And when you're an entrepreneur, if you're doing it remotely right, you're getting a college degree worth of learnings and lessons and personal evolution. I'd say more or less every 90 days. And just pushing through that, you will become what you need to become to service your business. So don't think of your business idea as a monolith and there being a straight line to what you're trying to achieve. It'll have so many twists and turns you can't even imagine. I'll give one bonus piece of advice just because it hasn't come up yet. And I understand a lot of your audience are young, aspiring entrepreneurs, and I have to congratulate every single one of you. I didn't take this leap till I was 30. Pain tolerance is the only quality required to be a successful entrepreneur. Endurance, shamelessness, ability to take embarrassing and fail, embarrassing moments and failure. That is all that's required. Do not give a damn about, pardon my language, don't care about how smart people are. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm a Division III C student, and I'm achieving more than a lot of Stanford graduates.
Wow.
So don't hook on this person has those skills or that person's that smart. It doesn't matter. Stamina and pain tolerance are all that's required to be a successful entrepreneur.
Jake, thank you so much for these truly insightful answers and this great piece of advice. You're building something that could genuinely change how the biggest decisions in football get made. And I'm still chewing on whether industry is ready to hand that much over to another AI model.
We're going to find out.
Exactly. But here are my 3 takeaways from today's episode. First, the best products come from your own friction. Jake didn't spot a market from the outside. He was a user who got stuck, and the thing that annoyed him became the company. Second, your first version is allowed to be wrong, but you're not allowed to defend it forever. The real skill isn't pivoting, but it's how fast you admit you built something for nobody. And third, a decision tool is also a blame tool. The moment you let someone outsource a call to your software, you've taken on responsibility for who's accountable when it goes wrong, and the good founders design exactly for that on purpose. So, your homework for the next episode is to find one thing in your life that you keep complaining about. The SQL and Python level annoyance you just accepted, and write it down with what tool fixes it and what it would actually do, because that's exactly where Jake started. If this episode made you think any different about AI in the real world, not the hype version, but the version that actually has money and careers on the line, make sure to share it with a person who's building something similar and needs to hear it. Once again, I'm Rayyan. This is the GenZEO Playbook podcast, and I'll see you in the next episode.